On March 5, 2008, Eve stayed home to study while her roommates went out to a party. Around 1:30 a.m., they left her safe inside their off-campus house. By the time they returned at 4:30 a.m., Eve was gone. The front door was wide open, the lights were still on, and her car? Missing. It didn't make sense. Eve was responsible, grounded, and didn't take risks. Why would she vanish in the middle of the night? Her friends called her phone, but there was no answer. Still, they waited, hoping she had gone out briefly and would return. But as hours passed, unease grew. By the next morning, Eve was still missing. Worried and out of options, one of her friends contacted the police. That's when they learned something chilling. Earlier that morning, a woman's body had been discovered just a mile away. Her identity was still unknown. Authorities showed a photo to one of Eve's friends, and with a trembling voice, she confirmed the worst. It was Eve. Eve Carson was born on November 19, 1985, in Athens, Georgia. Brilliant and compassionate, she had always stood out. In high school, she volunteered at nursing homes, worked as a congressional page, and even participated in stem cell research. At the University of North Carolina, she pursued a double major in political science and biology, earned a prestigious scholarship, and became student body president. She taught science to children, volunteered abroad, and had just received a job offer before graduation. Eve was, by every measure, exceptional. That made her murder even harder to comprehend. When police found her body, there was no phone, no wallet, and no car. She had been shot multiple times. Medical examiners confirmed there were no signs of sexual assault. Instead, the evidence pointed toward a robbery. Back at her house, her wallet and credit cards were also missing. Phone records showed her phone pinged a cell tower near a highway shortly after 3:30 a.m. But the phone itself? Gone. Soon, her car was located, abandoned just a few miles away. It was sent for forensic testing. Meanwhile, Eve's computer activity revealed she had been online until about 3:30 a.m. That meant she was still at home 2 hours after her roommates had left, and shortly before she vanished. Then came the first major lead. Surveillance footage from an ATM showed a man using Eve's bank card. He sat in the driver's seat of her car. In the blurry footage, someone else appeared in the back seat, possibly Eve. Investigators couldn't be sure. More attempts to use her card followed, at different ATMs, but none had security cameras. Then, on March 7, another attempted withdrawal occurred at a 24-hour convenience store.
This time, the footage captured a different man. Police believed 2 individuals were involved. They released both sets of surveillance photos to the public, asking for help. On March 12, a tip came in identifying the second man as 21-year-old Demario Atwater, who had a long criminal history, robbery, assault, drug offenses. Investigators discovered he lived near the store where Eve's card was last used. Demario was arrested. Soon after, detectives connected him to a 17-year-old named Lawrence Levet, also with a criminal record. When detectives compared Lawrence's mugshot to the ATM footage, it was a match. But Lawrence resisted arrest, barricading himself in his house. SWAT was called, and eventually he too was taken into custody. Neither suspect admitted involvement, but investigators used cell phone data to place both suspects near Eve's home that night. Their theory? Eve had been targeted at random. Demario and Lawrence broke into her home, forced her into her own car, and drove her to multiple ATMs, forcing her to withdraw money. When they hit the $700 limit, they drove her to a deserted area and shot her. They tracked the suspects down, 17-year-old Lawrence Levet and 21-year-old Demario Atwater. Both had lengthy criminal records. Eve had been randomly targeted. And then, the most haunting part of the story came to light. She had done everything they asked. She gave them her bank card. She withdrew every last dollar she could. She didn't scream. She didn't fight. She begged. Not to be saved, just to be let go. Eve looked them in the eyes and said,
"You don't have to do this. I won't tell anyone, just please, let me go home."
And then, in the final moments of her life, she asked them to pray with her. That small, fragile request, a final human plea from a young woman who believed somehow there was still a chance. But there was no mercy. They didn't wear masks. They never planned to let her live because Eve had seen their faces. And that was enough to seal her fate. They drove her to a quiet, empty street, far from any witness, far from help. And as the sun started to rise over North Carolina, they shot her, multiple times, with 2 different guns. Not because she fought, not because she ran, but because they didn't want to be caught. And in that senseless moment of violence, they silenced a voice that had only ever tried to help others. They killed her, not out of rage, not out of fear, but out of cold calculation. DeMario eventually accepted a plea deal, avoiding the death penalty by confessing. He told prosecutors that Eve pleaded for her life. She even asked them to pray with her before they killed her. Still, they shot her multiple times. DeMario received life in prison, plus 30 years. Lawrence, just 17 at the time, went to trial in December 2011. He was found guilty and sentenced to life without parole. Investigators later suspected Lawrence in another similar case, a man murdered in January 2008, followed by withdrawals from his account. But there wasn't enough evidence and those charges were dropped. Eve's case deeply affected the nation. In her memory, UNC established a scholarship and built a memorial garden. In North Carolina, laws were passed to increase penalties for gang-related crimes, directly inspired by the tragedy of Eve Carson. One of Eve's close friends even made it to the finals of American Idol, crediting Eve as the reason he found the courage to chase his dream. Eve's light still inspires others, even though her own journey was cut short. Eve Carson, a daughter, a scholar, a future leader, was murdered by 2 men who didn't even try to hide what they were doing, because to them, her life was just in the way. DeMario eventually confessed. Lawrence was also found guilty. Both are serving life sentences. But justice felt hollow, because Eve wasn't just another victim. She was a light in her community, on her campus, in the lives of everyone she touched. Her friends planted a garden in her memory. Her university started a scholarship in her name. Her parents, heartbroken but proud, keep her legacy alive by sharing her story. But none of it brings her back. The truth is, Eve Carson should still be here. She should have graduated. She should have chased her dreams. She should have grown old with people she loved. Instead, her life ended on a cold street at the hands of strangers who didn't care who she was. What happened to her wasn't just a crime. It was a reminder that even the brightest lights can be stolen in the darkest hours. So now we ask you to remember her, not just for how she died, but for how she lived. Because what Eve gave to the world, kindness, brilliance, hope, is what we need now more than ever. Rest in power, Eve Carson. You deserved so much more.